senior minister died in a hotel room, and he was found with all kinds of incriminating materials on his laptop. I don't currently support our ministry because I believe that they failed to demonstrate sincere repentance and make right the wrongs.
To another edition of Living Boldly with Purpose, and I am Dr. B. I am your host. Just excited about just talking about purpose and talking about how do we know when we're living in our purpose, and how do we get to our purpose. And several people come to me all the time. I don't know if I'm, I like doing this. And the way that I kind of look at it, and I'll probably say this over and over: if you're willing to do the thing that you're doing and never get paid for it, if you're willing to do it and take the time to be able to do it, if we were set where there were several things that you could pick to do, money was no object, and you would still do this. So if you won the lottery, and then you could do whatever you want with your life because you had millions of dollars to do it, would you still do the thing that you were put on this earth in the purpose to do? And if you can say, no, I wouldn't go back to that job, or no, I wouldn't go back to doing that, even if I wanted to. So then you're probably not to the point where you're living in total purpose. The other thing is, the way that I look at it when I'm doing my coaching, and John, you might agree with some of this, is I want to help people become the person they need to be in order to do whatever God put them on this earth to do. And so that's kind of how if you're working in God's purpose and you're working in, that this is what you do. Now, a lot of these turn into income producing, because I don't think God wants you to not live a life of abundance at the same time. But there might be some professions that you wouldn't be. Like I think of like a Mother Teresa or something like that. She was living in purpose and why God put her on this earth. I don't think she wanted for anything, but I don't think she was running around on yachts either. And so, and I'm not saying yachts are bad, because, there's a whole lot of people who are doing a lot of good for other people that have yachts. And so I definitely, when we talk about, John, if we get a chance to talk about money, I definitely want to, say that, millions and millions of dollars, if you have it, you have just more ability to do maybe live in your purpose than other people who don't, that are always struggling to find financial means to be able to do stuff. And so that's one thing, living in purpose. And the other thing is, when I think about our bodies and our health and our things that we need to do, and I'm excited to talk to John today just about that, because if your body isn't working the way that it should, it's really hard to do the things you were put on this earth to do. You can spend some time trying to do whatever you are, but if you're tired all the time and you can't get up and you can't move around, and you not only physical health but mental health as well. The last guest I had on, she was amazing, because she was just telling me, how she's a caregiver and how she got into burnout because of all what it took mentally to be able to take care of her husband who had cancer. And she's written some books and some pieces on it. And so mental health is super important as we do that. And so today we can talk to Coach John, and lives on the northern side of America in a country called Canada. That is a great country to visit. I would say I visited it several times before. I don't know if it's a great country for me to live in, because it's so cold in the winter. Now, I can do Canada all summer long and live there half a year and be excited about it. But I live in Denver, so I really can't say too much about it. But it's a lot colder than Denver when you're there. But the greatest people in the world live there. And so I could absolutely live there if a relationship was a key, and it is. And so it'd be a great place to live. And so I've asked John to tell a story, tell us about, how his upbringing went and how he ended up doing what he's doing now, and maybe some of the iterations, because we usually don't find our purpose in, junior high or high school, or right before we're 20, or maybe before we're 30 for some of us, before we're 40 or 50, because we have to try out a lot of stuff to see what God really has for us in our lives. And so, John, go ahead and tell us your story, and then we'll just chop it up with that about all the other wonderful things that are happening.
Well, I had a really interesting start in life, and then I was born at 26 weeks, and I was born at home. Yeah, and it was 2 pounds 9 ounces, and I was not expected to survive. So we were living in a trailer park, and my mom. It was a Sunday morning. Actually, it was Sunday morning this month, 1982, though.
Okay.
And my mom thought she had to go to the bathroom. It was about 5 a.m. Got up to go to the toilet and realized, nope, it's not that I have to go to the bathroom. I think the baby's coming. And what my dad says is, if you ever want something to wake you up more than an entire pot of coffee would, it would be your wife who's 6 months pregnant saying, I think the baby's coming.
Wow.
Yeah. And so labor was about 3 seconds, as my mom describes it. Like it really wasn't much because I wasn't very big.
Yeah.
And I guess I came out, and my dad looked at this sort of mass of tissue because the placenta came out at the same time. And he was sort of just came apart in his hands, placenta in one hand, me in the other. I fit into the palm of his hand. And my mom's first question was like, what is it? Is it alive? And
Wow.
and then so my dad, he called we had like what we call like a diagnostic and treatment center. It wasn't like a full hospital, but he called them first because they were the closest to us. And they got an ambulance out, I think, within about half an hour. Like my dad did CPR with his pinky finger, and he got a little syringe to unplug my nose and kind of got my heart going and my lungs inflated. And then I started screaming. So I guess they tell me that was my first temper tantrum. And that probably saved my life because it got my heart beating, got my lungs inflated, and got me started. I still had quite a road ahead of me. I had to spend about 9 weeks in intensive care, so in neonatal intensive care. And that was, I don't remember much of it. Apparently I was well taken care of. The nurses loved me because I was really cute. But they said, this one's a fighter. We think he's going to make it. But the first thing they told him when I got there was, don't come back for about 3 or 4 days. We don't want you getting too attached because he might die. And I have mixed feelings about that message. I mean, obviously I'm here today and so on, but like I sort of understand, but I don't, because I'm like, I understand they were just speaking from a practical perspective and trying to maybe save some hurt or something like that. But I would think now that I'm a parent of 2 beautiful boys, if someone had said that to me, I'd be like, no, I want to spend every minute that I can with this beautiful living being for whatever time that I do have. That would have been my message. So that was a bit of a chaotic start to my life. I joke that I was a failure of 1980s birth control, and,
Gotcha.
and my parents were hoping, because my mom, I forget what she was using, but she was on birth control, and my brother was only 14 months old at the time, and they were kind of hoping for a girl, and they got me.
Got you. Well, and I don't think that would happen today in today's world, that they would tell you not to come to the hospital.
Yeah.
They want you to be there the whole time. But man, so they didn't get the girl. They didn't. Yeah. Well, they got a baby that they weren't expecting, and they ended up with you, which I'm sure they're pretty proud of you. After all,
they're not. They kind of grew to love me, so I'm fortunate that I have a good relationship with them. In fact, currently they live only about 5 minutes away from where I live, so it's quite nice.
Do you have a sister?
No, just my brother, who's a year older, and myself. My brother lives overseas in Turkey, actually, and so.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, he lives quite a ways away, and so. We saw him this year, but we might see him every year, every second year in person kind of thing. He teaches at a private school over there. So that was kind of my start. They had to teach me a lot of things because when you're born like that premature, like 26 weeks is pretty early. Even today with modern medical technology, there's still complications that are hard to get around.
Yeah.
I had pretty poor eyesight. I had laser eye surgery, about 16 years ago now. And so I have 20/20 vision, which is great, but I have pretty poor eyesight, digestive issues, coordination issues. And I only found out a couple of years ago that I have ADHD,
Okay.
which I'm whatever. I'm kind of on the fence about. I'm not medicating or treating it. It's like, my brain makes sense now. And now I know how to work with my brain the way that it works.
all you need.
And so, but so I was a pretty hot-headed little kid. Had quite a temper on me. I understand it now. Obviously I can see it through an adult lens, and I look back and I go, oh, I understand why that was the case now. Turns out I'm an empath, and so I kind of, without trying to freak people out, because I'm not psychic or clairvoyant or anything, but I say that I can kind of read people, and I've learned how to sort of manage it really well. And I don't get it perfect every time. So I think it's a combination of being empathic and with ADHD having a brain that can kind of process rapid pattern recognition, that kind of thing. And a joke that's my coaching superpower is X-ray vision. So I can kind of just read people.
X-ray vision,
yeah.
I love it.
But when I was a kid, I didn't know. So I got into a lot of fights as a kid because I obviously had a lot of big feelings. These temper tantrums were all these emotions that would eventually absorb and build up inside of me, and they would just come out. But I always had a conscience too. It was weird. I shouldn't say it was weird, but it was kind of ironic that I would like totally lose my temper, get into a massive like fist fight with some kid, and then I'd go home and cry because I hurt a kid. Like, wow. It was very conflicted. I was raised in a Christian household. That whole thing is kind of an interesting story in and of itself. The fellowship group that I'm a part of at the time of recording this is currently under FBI investigation for a decades-long pattern of systemic child abuse. Thankfully, I was not a victim of. It seems like whenever you introduce a hierarchy into even like a faith system, that there will always be the wolves that come in and come to prey on the trusting sheep. And so, anyway, so I was raised in a, we're kind of referred to as 2x2s. That's just in reference to our ministers, our homeless itinerant ministers that go out in pairs, trying to model their ministry after kind of the New Testament ministry that was sent out. That's the idea behind it. We meet in homes for fellowship gatherings. We have gospel services in like community halls and things like that. So it's a very, I was going to say, used to be a very low key, sort of Christian fellowship, small in number. Who knows? I wouldn't even know what we have worldwide in terms of congregants, but I'm sure there's some mega churches in the U.S. that probably have more than us. But nonetheless, we never really realized as kids, like my parents now, they tell me, looking back, like, oh, we always kept a close eye on you, because we'd have annual conventions as well. So that was where like, a whole area, like maybe half of a province would come together once a year to congregate for 4 days of like fellowship on a purpose-built like farm or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that practice just stems back to like our fellowship has its kind of origins in what was called Faith Mission, which was I believe they still exist to this day. Back in like Scotland or Ireland, back during the time there was like kind of a revival. So our fellowship really came about. There was a lot of young people who really felt like they wanted to sort of fight against what I guess we'd call it legalism or clericalism. And so along comes this sort of firebrand, like itinerant preachers, like, we're going to try an experiment. We're going to try going in faith, and we're going to take nothing. He tried it on his own. Then he took 7 other guys, and they did this bicycle trip mission and came back reporting there's people coming, listening to it. And when they started, their original intention was just to bring more people to the gospel and then say, hey, now that you've found the gospel, go to a church in your area. Like, it was very non-denominational in nature. They were just itinerant ministers trying to bring people to the gospel, or bring the gospel to people, either way. But gradually, I suppose, like any movement, eventually it gets momentum and grows into what it does and what it is today. But so that was just a little backstory behind like the faith group that I'm a part of. And our group, probably not unlike others, existed with what we call the exclusivity bug. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but you follow this way or you go to hell kind of thing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't ascribe to that. I still, I'm in a bit of a conflicted place. I don't currently support our ministry because I believe that they failed to demonstrate sincere repentance and make right the wrongs that have been going on for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. So that I believe that they have failed to that. I believe that God has removed his blessing from their ministry because of that, because of their failure to repent the way that King David did when his sin was revealed to him. Mm-hmm. But I still appreciate how we gather in fellowship. I enjoy our little home-based gatherings and things like that. But I don't find my fellowship exclusively in that nowadays. So anyways, that's kind of the backstory. I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but
I love it.
I'm a part of this little group here. As I said, we're kind of notorious right now. I believe in the last 2 years, the floodgates opened in like March of 2023. Like a senior minister died in a hotel room, and he was found with all kinds of incriminating materials on his laptop and things like that. And it turns out he'd been living a double life as like a serial sexual predator. While being one of the most respected ministers in the ministry of this fellowship, kind of thing. And it was like this bombshell that like sent shockwaves, and then eventually, that led to what is now like a very widespread, in fact, maybe even somewhat global in nature, FBI investigation into our fellowship, looking into like historical child abuse and so on. And on a per capita basis, if I understand right, we are probably one of the, I say we, just referring to the fellowship as a whole, one of the most prolific. So there's over 1,000 documented offenders, and, who knows how many victims, really. So that, of course, I'm a father of 2. And, I would say the thing that would bring me very close to committing murder would be somebody harming my child.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. I think I could be restrained by God from doing that, but I would be about as close as I get to wanting to murder somebody. And so the fact that we have a ministry that doesn't understand the parable of the Good Samaritan enough, to bind up the wounds of the wounded and care for them, and seems more concerned with, Pharisaical legalism and with maintaining their place and their status, just has left me sort of, well, actually, I would say this is a good thing as a whole. Ironically, it's not a good thing. There's this trail of like victimized people, although I do believe God in his redemptive nature can even help victims recover from, the most difficult of experiences people have had to endure. But anyways, so that was me. I grew up in this interesting fellowship. Grew up in a small town, which probably meant that I had small aspirations growing up. We lived the pre-internet days. I was entertained by a gray monochrome dot matrix Game Boy with like Tetris and Mario Brothers, like old. It's funny. I don't know if I'm 43. I don't know if you're past that or not, but like I'm like old school. I think the precursor to that was like the Atari.
I promise you was Genesis, Atari, T9. I graduated high school in '83. So okay, you're a little ahead of me then. You must be knocking on the door of 60 if I am doing my math right. Yeah, I will be 60 in March. So yeah. So.
Oh well, I want to wish you a happy early birthday. That's a remarkable feat to get to 6 decades of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know all your Tecmo Bowl and all those things that I were playing by the time you were doing stuff. So my kids.
Oh man. So that's awesome. Yeah. So growing up in a small town had its pluses in that, like, just very small community based living, which was really nice. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, like, we got bored and did a lot of stupid things. So my aspirations at that point were like, I guess I'll just go to university. I'll become a teacher because that feels like that would be a stable job. Mm-hmm. I was good at science and math, and I figured that would give me the best shot at employment versus being like a social studies teacher. Mm-hmm. That was my calculations. I was like, if I do like physics or chemistry or math, I'm more likely to be employed because it's harder and less people will do that. And so, interestingly, I went through school, largely got straight A's, which I don't even know if the kids these days get A's or grades or letter grades or whatever. But back in the day when we were allowed to grade, I got straight A's. And I got my brain free of charge, so I can't actually take the credit for it, but I've got a pretty good brain for seeing something and remembering it. And it worked well for the traditional style of education, where I could just basically see something once, I could go and rewrite it on a test. And that's why my ADHD never got picked up, was because even though I had all kinds of focus and attention issues, I had such a good memory that I could just see something and write it on a test. That sounds like, that'd be great. But there's a downside to this. I look back and reflect and think it also let me coast. Mm-hmm. So, God blessed me with the brain that I got and gave me the gifts that he did, but I could just coast.
Yeah.
And so I did. I coasted through university. It was a nanotech researcher, so high level, chemistry researcher. I got bored of that, joined the Navy, became a Marine engineer, did that for about 6 years. Found that I enjoyed the structure of the military, hated the politics. And when you have a brain that's used to seeking out and finding and creating efficiencies in a military that is like a dinosaur lumbering through, 1,000 years ago, and then an impulsive brain that sometimes can't quite restrain my tongue, it just ended up being even though I excelled in my trade as a marine engineer, I was one step below chief engineer. I just kept shooting myself in the foot by opening my mouth. And so that led to getting out of the Navy, and my wife and I just hopped on a world tour. I didn't actually tell how my wife and I met, though, so maybe we'll take one step back, because this is kind of a fun one too. So January 2003, I'm 21 years old. I get a call from some friends of mine. Hey, John, we've just met this cute Aussie girl and brought her over to Victoria. I was living in the city of Victoria at the time, on Vancouver Island, so north of Washington State for the Americans. I said, hey, we met this cute Aussie girl, but we're busy today. Do you want to show her around? I was like, yeah, of course I do. So for about 2.5 days, this girl and I, we hung out and we spent a lot of time together, showed her around, took her Frisbee golfing, showed her a really good time. We flirted a lot, but we both had this idea that we were never going to see each other again. It was just this very random meeting. We clearly had some chemistry, but I thought I'd never see her again. But just as she was going down the escalator, just before she went down the escalator to get back in the ferry terminal, go back to Vancouver to catch her next flight, she quickly stuffed a piece of paper into my hand. And it said, a Gumtree note from Michelle. My wife's name is Michelle, and she's from Australia. And so it had her Hotmail address on there. And so I emailed her about a week later, and that sort of opened a line of communication. And gradually we started talking, emailing back and forth, and then talking. I wonder if people remember like ICQ and AOL or AOL Instant Messenger. And there was one app called Trillion where you could like consolidate 5 or 6 different messaging apps. And so I would be in my research lab at University of Victoria, where I was conducting my nanotechnology research. And there would be time where I'd set up my reactions and things, because we were working on creating various types of nanoparticles. And then I would joke, between like baking my nanoparticles at like 1500 degrees Celsius, I'd go over and hop on the computer and use that time, instead of doing like further research, to chat to this girl back in Australia. So, oh man. Anyways, yeah, I ended up leaving the research project because I couldn't sort of stand the thought of being cooped up in a lab all the time, even though it was a very cool project on the surface. Nanotechnology research is just very grinding, or at least at that time, what we were working was kind of just very grinding at the time. And so that's when I just went and joined the Navy. So about 2.5 years after we met, I'd say about a year after we met, we started talking like every day on the phone. We got to that stage where we were talking for a couple hours a day. So it was very clear that something was happening there. So eventually I convinced her to come back to Canada, because I was like, there's clearly something here. We need to figure this out. Yeah. About a month, maybe not even a month before she flew back to Canada, I had a motorcycle accident.
Oh no!
I forgot to mention that I used to race motorcycles on the questionable side of the law. If I could just say that.
Okay, gotcha.
I was a bit of a reckless young man. And about a month before arrival, I had a motorcycle accident and injured my left ankle in particular. I dislocated. My bone popped out of my foot. It didn't break, but it popped out of place because my foot basically got yanked off the bottom of my leg, and a bone popped out, and then it kind of snapped back into place. Sounds pretty gross when you describe it now. But anyways, so that she called me and she's like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just in the emergency room. I've had a motorcycle accident." Wow. She's like, "What happened?" Mm-hmm. Anyways, turned out to be this really great blessing, because with an injured ankle, I couldn't go on the ships. So I was in the Navy, but you can't go on an unstable platform with a compromised ankle. Ship, as soon as you get out to sea, the ship is pitching and rolling. So I was put on like modified light duty, where I was stuck in a room for 2 hours a day. I had to just show up to justify the government paying me, and then I'd go home. And that allowed us to have a lot of time together. So she flew over, And this pre-social media, if you can remember those days, the only thing I had was one time she mailed me a letter that had like a 2x3 like school photo kind of thing from like when she was 17 or something. And I was like, I haven't seen you for 2.5 years, because video chatting wasn't a thing yet.
No, guys, no.
Social meeting wasn't a thing. And I was like, I haven't seen you for 2.5 years. How you're flying into Vancouver in July, with the busiest month of the year, in like one of the busiest airports in the world. How am I going to find you? And she said, oh, I'll wear a colorful hat. That's what she said. The day comes, I get to the airport. The doors open for someone, how you have to like go through these weird doors to like get through customs and security and all that. And you come out and there's people waiting to greet you, and it's jam packed full of people. And so I'm trying to work my way through this crowd, and the doors open, and out comes this girl wearing a full-on Tigger costume, head to toe.
Oh, gosh. The color hat, that's for sure.
Oh, and I knew unquestionably that instant that was the one.
Tigger it is. Wow. That's
and so she couldn't see me, though, because there was so many people there.
You didn't have a colorful.
No, I hadn't thought about doing that. And so she's thinking in her head, this guy better be here. I didn't just fly halfway around the world, put on a Tigger costume, and come out to be stood up. So, but then she didn't realize I was like wading through the crowd trying to get to her, kind of thing, because I knew who it was. But so she turned around because someone had like asked her, what's the Tigger costume about? And then she turned around and boom, I was right there. I'd got to her. And so she jumped into my arms, wrapped her legs around me. Everybody started cheering. So, of course, I kissed her. And it was like a Hollywood movie moment. And that was the start of 4 months later. We were engaged, went back to Australia, lived over there for a year, got married over there, came back. And so that's in a nutshell how I met my wife. Funny, there's a whole TV series about that. So after leaving the Navy, my wife and I decided to travel the world.
Okay.
We spent about 3 years traveling around the world, different countries, living and teaching and whatnot. One of the stops along the way, for the sake of brevity, I'm shortening some of this, but one of the stops we ended up going to, when we lived in Mexico, we met a gentleman from South Africa, became friends with him. A year later, we were living in Poland, and he came up to live with us in Poland for a bit, but he had to return to South Africa. But he said, hey, why don't you guys come down to South Africa? And we could, my parents run this organization, this nonprofit, we could use people like you to help. So we ended up going down to South Africa. And that's really where I had an experience that obviously dramatically changed my life forever. And about two weeks after arriving, a little over 2 weeks after arriving, I was out on a nature reserve where we were teaching. And one night I was going back to the instructor's cabin. We're like on a, whatever it is, 500 acre, 5,000 acre, like nature reserve. It was very big, going back to my cabin at night. And I got jumped by 4 guys.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So at first what happened was I walked up, the cabin door was slightly ajar, and I was kind of like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I closed it. Open the door, and there's 3 guys in there. And my first thought was, because I recognized one of them, he was one of the Rangers, but he was not in uniform. And so my first thought was like, oh, there must be something wrong with the cabin. Maybe they showed up to fix something. No, they were robbing me. That's what they were doing. I didn't see the 4th guy, who was outside the cabin, and he smashed me across the head with a rock. And now at that point, like my brain's registering that something's really wrong, but I don't, yeah. And so the other guys, meanwhile, they jump up and they're piling out of the cabin. This guy grabbed me by the scruff of my shirt, and I remember this in particular. He smiled at me and then said, shh, and then smashed me across the face again with this rock or this brick, whatever it was that he was holding, and nearly knocked me out. I fell to the ground, and these guys just piled on and just started kicking and stomping and beating on me. And I remember, it's so interesting to think back to that incident. I remember thinking, I can't die tonight, because if I die tonight, I'm going to hell.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yeah. And that was quite something to experience. I was 29 years old at the time. And I was like, and now keep in mind, it's dark out. Nobody else knows where I am because they're all in like a few buildings over in the dining hall, whatever, all the students and my wife and the other facilitator. And I'm screaming for help and nobody's hearing me because they're all in there making a whole bunch of noise and things. Later, like a day or two later, one of the students said, I remember hearing a sound, but I thought it was just the monkeys, because monkeys can, they can be quite screechy and noisy. And in one sense, I would say, like, I don't have a logical explanation for how I got the strength to get back to my feet and fight off 4 guys, enough that I could break free from them and make a hobbled sort of run for the building where everybody else was. And for whatever reason, they didn't chase me. I was concussed, but they hadn't actually managed to stab me yet. They had knives, but hadn't managed to stab me yet. And, their objective was to beat me to death because they'd done it to a guy the night before, and succeeded tragically. And so I got to the building and, blood streaming down my face, I got boot marks all over. I've been attacked and I don't know how many guys there are and things. Like my head's all messed up. I don't know what's going on really. And long story short, we kind of ended up also being trapped in that building for about 45 minutes because these guys were trying to bash down the doors and we didn't know how many were out there. And if you know anything about South Africa, they travel often in roving gangs of 15 or so. They often are armed with machetes and things, and they will just brutally murder people. So it was a very, very terrifying experience. And I remember just praying that they didn't have guns because I was like, if they just start shooting through the windows, because they couldn't get through the bars and the doors and stuff. We barricaded our students, some were quite brave and we got like some tables and chairs against doors. And, my wife was incredibly brave in all of this. She got people armed with like pots and pans and we were boiling water to throw boiling water on them if they broke through the door. Like it was this intense thing. And it was only by chance that one of our students was able to call the police, and it happened to be a senior police official walking by when whatever phone rang, whatever desk, and he chose to answer it. Because normally police just, pardon me, it's hard to explain if you haven't lived in a country where police are corrupt and don't care. But South Africa is one of those places where a large portion of lower level police are in some way corrupt or don't care. And it may be in the last 15 years that things have improved, but that was the case when we were down there. The more senior police officers do care to some degree, but it's an uphill battle. Anyways, so eventually some police showed up and these guys melted away into the bushes. The police were like, oh, they're gone. You guys are fine. We'll just carry on. My wife was like, excuse me? My husband needs to get to a hospital. We're not leaving anybody out here. You're the ones with guns. You are going to stay here until every last one of us is off this property tonight because they were here like 5 minutes ago. They've not got very far away. Why aren't you getting like a, she was just like a pit bull, Mm-hmm. She was so like brave and ferocious in that moment, because of course her husband, like she's looking at her husband slumped over, leaning against a wall being like, is he going to die tonight?
Yeah. Wow.
And so I like to say that I got just like my toe dipped in a taste of what hell might be like. I was alone in the darkness screaming for help and nobody came. And the reason why, I was still a Christian at that time, but God made it clear to me that I was a cerebral Christian. I talked about I used to coast in life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I coasted in my Christianity too because I was smart and I could quote Bible verses and say things that made me sound like I knew what I was talking about and so on.
Gotcha.
And I thought about this phrase, like you've been found, you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. I believe that was the message to Belshazzar in Daniel 5. Forgive me if I'm off on my scripture, but I think that's roughly where it was. Mm-hmm. But the message, you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. God spared me in that night, but he allowed me to get into a certain depth of that experience to leave a mark. And for a number of years after that, I struggled with PTSD, binge eating, food addiction. I thankfully didn't turn to drugs or alcohol, but these were the coping tools that I had. Mm-hmm. And that caused me to gain about 120 pounds and become morbidly obese. And I lost myself in the mm-hmm. process. Like, who am I? What's really interesting is about 4 or 5 months after that happened to me, we ended up going back to South Africa. We flew back to Australia for 3 months to psychologically decompress, because there were like numerous other incidents that happened, none quite so violent and direct as that one. But, one of our other facilitators had a sibling murdered. Our house was broken into multiple times. Like, there was just, you constantly feel like you're, just living on edge, just, panic button for armed private security to show up and just shoot to kill kind of thing. Like, it's just, South Africa is this paradox, because it's this beautiful country, and there's a lot of good people in South Africa that are just suffering as this nation wrestles with, I don't know, whatever it's wrestling with. And you could say we got caught in the crossfire there. And so I ended up, about 5 months later, I was in my brother's apartment in Istanbul in Turkey, and I couldn't sleep that night. And I realized I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from feeling angry all the time. I'm exhausted for like wanting to kill somebody for looking at me sideways. I didn't even at that time fully grasp like the sort of depth of trauma that I experienced in that incident. And I never obviously acted on the violent thoughts in my head, but it really disturbed me because, again, I didn't understand. It disturbed me because I'm a peace-loving like empath here. It felt such a departure from who I was that like I would feel like this intense rage and even want to kill people. I never did. But I was like, where are these thoughts coming from, and why are they coming into my head? I don't want them here. I don't want this. I don't want what I'm feeling. And so I made the decision. I said, I was never going to see these guys again, but I said, I need to forgive them. And more than that, I need to ask God to forgive them for what they did. Because I wanted to be set free. I didn't want to be stuck just living with this rage all the time. And so I made the decision to embark on the process of forgiveness. And I say the process because it didn't happen by accident. I prayed to God and asked him that he would help me to come to the place of forgiveness. But it was like I had to like continue to kind of go through the rage and then try to like ask for God to help me. And I tried to direct my thoughts to like what happened to these guys. And that might seem like a strange thing to say. And it's not that I don't think that they ought to pay the punishment for their crime. But what happened to them that this is what they ended up doing with their lives? And again, it doesn't excuse, because there's plenty of people who've been through hard circumstances who didn't turn to murdering people. But nonetheless, I had to generate some degree of compassion for these individuals to be able to come to a place of forgiveness. And not only that, ask God to forgive them. Because if I just said, I forgive you, but I hope God kills you, I still have hatred in my heart. Mm-hmm. So that started the process of recovery. The ironic thing is, I really grew to hate myself and who I had become. So I went from like being an athlete to being a morbidly obese guy whose body just couldn't do the things it used to do anymore. And I didn't know a way out. And I didn't realize I was still operating from a very traumatized place. And I was trying to, heavy metal, snort pre-workout, power lift my way into oblivion, somehow trying to destroy my body to rebuild it or something. It was just this very, eventually exhausting a way of living until at one point in time, I was applying for some life insurance, and I had to get weighed and waist measurement and blood pressure and all the biometrics they take. And I had to have a rider put on my life insurance because they said, you're at higher risk of dying sooner. I was just like, oh, that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, what am I going to do? And so I ended up hiring this guy to coach me. And I tried coaching before and it really had failed. Not because the coach was bad, not because I'm a bad person, but because I didn't know the help I needed, and neither did they. And so it just didn't work. This guy came into my life, and I was determined to prove this guy wrong. I was determined to prove that I was a lost cause, a failure, and nothing was ever going to work for me again. That's what I was determined to do. And this guy showed me compassion in a way that I've never experienced before. And it took me a long time to even accept, because as a guy, like I viewed compassion with suspicion. But in my struggles, he modeled for me compassion and helped me to learn and come to understand what true compassion is. And in that, I was able to begin showing myself compassion and start on this road to transformative change. All the struggles that I went through, I struggled with anxiety and along with like the PTSD, the binge eating, the food addiction, anxiety, and alongside anxiety, I'll call it a type of depression because when you burn out your nervous system, it falls into a really sort of low energy state that can mimic depression. It was just a very exhausting way of living as well. It led me to having to dig deep and look for answers way beyond what I would have ever expected and way beyond what I was equipped to do at that time. Had I not gone through all of these experiences that spanned probably 10 years or more, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. And so if I could sum it up like this, I would say, God gives us gifts. Mm-hmm. We often don't recognize those gifts because they're inherent to ourselves and how we function. I didn't know my brain was unique and special. I just didn't understand why other people didn't do what I did because it seemed so easy.
Yeah.
And then you might get a little bit big-headed for a little while. Hey, look at me. I'm pretty smart, And then life smashes you in the face with a baseball bat. And I was brought to the end of myself, the absolute end of myself and beyond anything I was capable of dealing with on my own. And I was immensely humbled. Mm-hmm. And maybe another conversation will talk about how I lost all my life savings in a failed business because I had a narcissist who took advantage of me.
Oh, God.
and I don't use that term lightly. I have a background in psychology, and I'm preparing for a master's in psych, and so I use that term. He fit the clinical profile of one, a pathological liar who manipulated me because I wanted to believe and I was vulnerable and so on and so forth. So that was a whole nother thing. That was another thing. So not only was I humbled in terms of I lost my physical abilities, my physique, the things that I was pretty proud of. My intellect couldn't help me. Mm-hmm. I lost all my money in business. The only thing I didn't lose is my marriage. And it's not because I didn't try.
Wow. Okay.
It's because my wife, I'm not saying I didn't never cheat on her. I don't mean that. I just mean I was so low that I just told my wife, just go home, go back to Australia, just leave me. Wow. You're like, you didn't sign up for this. You didn't ask for this. You don't have to stay with me. And bless her heart, my wife refused to give up on me.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
And so, we just had our 18th anniversary not long before the time of recording this. And it's due to her that we're still together. So I owe her a lot because she saw in me what I couldn't see in myself.
Yes.
And so when people might get to know me and what I do, and I'm pretty damn good at what I do, I might even be so bold as to say that I'm a world-class coach.
Okay.
But I got my brain free of charge, so I can't take the credit for it. And it took a lot of being severely humbled in life to get me to the place to realize that these gifts that I've been given, God gave them to me, but he gave them to me so that I could use them in service to other people. Mm-hmm. To not elevate myself above others, because I believe that everyone is given gifts. I'm not the only person that God gave some gifts to, and so I wouldn't be able to do what I do today if it wasn't for the experiences I went through and the people who didn't give up on me. Mm-hmm. That brought me to where I am today. And maybe for those who are listening, if there's anybody who's like, here's the thing, it's hard in say 40 minutes or whatever to talk about like 10 years of hell. And I wouldn't put up my hand and ask for it. I remember one time kneeling to pray and feeling like I was just staring into blackness. Like, God, where are you? Why can't I feel anything? Mm. And, all I wanted was peace. And all I had was this inner turmoil. But it kept me looking for answers. It kept me digging. It kept me, and now here I am doing what I do. And I like to say that where science meets story is like kind of my thing now. I have a strong background in science. I forgot to mention I was a power line technician as well, so high voltage electricity and utilities. So I went from like marine engineering, power line technician. I was a nanotech researcher. I've done a lot of different things. I have a really good brain for science. I've got a great memory. I'm really good at like solving complex problems and these kinds of things. Believe me, there's lots I struggle with. I don't want to make it sound like I got lots of struggles, let me tell you. Yeah. But these are the things I'm good at. And so But to get to the place where I'm even comfortable with the fact that I'm good at these things, but to recognize that being good at these things doesn't elevate me above others. It just means that God has gifted me with these things. He's asking me what I'm going to do with them in service to others.
Yeah.
The parable of the talents, right? I know talents was talking about a unit of currency, but I think it really fits. Like, I've given you these gifts. What's the return on these gifts that I've given you? And that's what he's looking for.
Wow. That's so cool. So, let me get myself back on here.
Yeah, I was like, let's just have a little pause here and let that sink in for folks.
So in your story, you talked about you're right now. You said you're a world-class coach. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to be, in your mind, what a world-class coach? Like, what are you able to see? Because when I think of coaching isn't telling somebody what to do. Coaching is seeing where somebody's at and then helping them get to where they want to go. And so, and a lot of people can't do that. I think of like a Michael Jordan, right? Yeah. I don't think Michael Jordan can be a very good coach.
No, because
most of the world can't do what he was able to do. So he can't not only coach the talent that he had, but he has to be able to see what somebody's missing, and that might be hard to do.
I would say the reason I would use that phrasing is because I've worked with high-level, world-class people, and I'm not naming names, and I'm not saying that to toot my horn. I don't put anybody on a pedestal, but I've worked with very high-level, successful people, and sometimes they've been surprised or even shocked at like some of the advice I've given and the things that I can see. I like I said, I joked that my superpower is X-ray vision. I seem to be able to read people and sort of see their potential. I see a path forward for them. And I can't really explain how it all happens. And I don't always tell people right away because I'm like, I can't give you all of this because you can't swallow all of it. It's like trying to feed you an elephant like in one piece. Like it just doesn't work. So then my responsibility is like, how do I guide you through this? And we do this in real life where it's going to be really challenging. There's going to be a lot of things that are come up in your path that are going to knock us off of this plan that we have. I still utilize a lot of the fundamental tools from nutrition, fitness, stress management, sleep science. I do addictions counseling, like psychology, neuroscience. And I say like, I've gradually built a really comprehensive toolkit that complements the skill set that I have. Mm-hmm. So the other reason I could say world-class is because there's not many problems you could throw my way that I couldn't help you solve in one sense. Obviously, if you come to me and say I'm terminally ill with an exotic cancer, that's way outside my scope of practice.
Of course, no, you're not a Miller miracle guy. You're not the
no. I'm not a miracle healer. But what it is I can just see in people and see what's possible for them, help them see what they can't yet see themselves. I tell people you can borrow my belief in you until you believe in yourself.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So I guess that's what I would say.
So which makes total sense because when we're in this day and age, right, where it's the coach, everybody's the coach, that is going to go out and change your life. But if you're not willing to serve others to help them be able to get there, or you're not able to see that thing, then you're just kind of taking people's money. And I think a lot of people, believe they have the answer. I look at it, I have this thing, be, do, have, right? You got to become the person before you can do the thing and have. And so a lot of these coaches that are out there will just they'll give you all these programs. They'll give you, they don't even really want to talk to you most of the time, right? They want to they want to record a video online and then you're supposed to follow this cookie cutter formula in order to achieve and have the things you want to have. And I think so many people get sucked into, they have success, so they must be a good coach.
That's the Michael Jordan dilemma, right? Mm-hmm. I've been a mindset coach, a high ticket sales coach inside of mentorships as well. So not only did I build a successful business, I also mentored others in that arena, even though predominantly I still focus on health coaching because that's my true passion. Mm-hmm. Because coaching is coaching. Even when someone comes to me with an idea and potential as a coach, I'm like, this is exciting. I would love to help you take your gifts and serve others. Yes. But what I experienced, and I ended up like having falling outs because I would be like, you are bringing people into this program who are not qualified for this program. You're taking their money and then you're dumping them in my lap and asking me to save them. When you should, if you had integrity, you would not have taken their money in the first place. And so it's like the military problem I run into again, where like, working for other people doesn't seem to work for me very well.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of feel like, when you think of like a Tony Robbins or a Les Brown or a Wayne Dyer, and millions of people show up to Tony Robbins, which, I think there's some phenomenal things he's able to do with folks. And I think everybody eventually could go there and benefit from one of his seminars or something. But so many people are not ready. They haven't become the person who can go to a Tony Robbins, convention or whatever and come out, on the other side where they can be successful because they don't have any habits. They don't have any discipline. They don't have all these prerequisites. And I almost wish, because I know he can say, well, if you just do all these things over time, but so many people get so excited. They go there, they leave there. Monday morning shows up.
Yeah.
What do I do? I'm not doing that, right?
And maybe we could call this the Tony Robbins problem.
There we go. Yeah.
You go to these seminars, you get all hyped up and all excited, and you have this dopamine-fueled euphoria. And then reality comes back and slaps you in the face. And you realize that I had the wrong idea about this. I was going to go to this seminar. I was going to be entirely transformed as a person without doing the work. Mm-hmm. The ugly, hard, uncomfortable, sometimes painful work that it actually takes. And I was hoping that this wave of motivation that I felt at this massive seminar or whatever was going to carry me through this entire transformation. So what I do is a little bit different because I work one-on-one. I don't do group coaching. I don't do cookie cutter. I work with you as an individual. And I recognize it's not scalable. I'm leaving money on the table and I don't care.
Yes.
Because I love what I do. And so I will work with you as an individual. There will be no cookie cutter. I joke that I'm going to help you kayak through a tunnel of sewage.
Ooh, I like that. Wow.
When you were trying to go through it in hip waders, I showed up with a pair of kayaks. You still got to go through the tunnel of sewage, but I'm going to go through it with you because I've been through the you-know-what before. Yeah.
Well, and that makes so much sense because you have a great enough identity to say, this is who I am, this is what I'm able to do, and I'm going to help you find that yourself. And we're going to go through this together. And I think that's a lot of things coaches don't do as well, is they're not willing to go through. How could they if they ever have a conversation with you, right? If they really don't know who you are, you're coaches, the guy at the other end of their video, right?
Coaches build a cult of personality. And I understand from a marketing perspective why you do that. I'm not trying to be too hard. But the problem is you build yourself up to be a savior. And I go, who am I? I'm Daniel. Right? I'm Daniel.
Yeah.
I'm an advisor to kings. That's what I am. Right? I'm an advisor to royalty.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting on a throne. I say to people, imagine you're a student driving car and I'm in the passenger seat. You're driving the car and you still got to drive the car. I'm not driving the car for you. Mm-hmm. You got to drive the car. But because I'm not worried about driving the car, and because I've helped a lot of other people learn how to drive a car, I can see things that you can't see. Yeah. And that's kind of the magic of it. It's just I bring in a really, really thorough, education, a wealth of I call it a wealth now. It didn't feel like it going through all that stuff, but a wealth of like life experience shaped by hardship, and a real I just have this fascination with human beings and their stories. Everyone has a story. And to me, I love it. It's why I was podcasting as well. My podcast, it's on hiatus presently, but it was called Between the Before and After. It was a space for me to explore people's stories of facing and going through and overcoming adversity because I wanted a space that was bigger than just a before and after on social media. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go through the nitty gritty, dirty stuff where we talk about what really took place. And that's why I say my unofficial tagline for what I do is where science meets story. I bring in the science, but I don't try to force the science down your throat. I get to know your story as an individual, and I help the science fit you rather than the other way around.
Wow, I like that. Well, when I think of, you've been studying a law of entropy, right? And knowing that, law of entropy says that, things will left to itself will disintegrate or fall apart or move. And, I think of, all some of these coaching things where, or people in personal development, right? If you don't do anything, you really don't. You will lose, didn't write, you'll lose your ability, what you've learned, because how many you can, but most of us can't remember everything we've read in a book before.
I got kids who disrupt my sleep. That fades a little bit when you get sleep deprived, I got to admit.
Yeah. But then I think of, so how do you help people with that personal development piece on their own path? Because, everybody's personal development doesn't work the same or is the same, cookie cutter for every single person, because we all learn differently. We all see differently. We all are because of our experiences, we all come from different places. So how do you help people become the person that God wants them to be? I
have two thoughts that I want to put forward here. One's a bit of a sidetrack.
Okay.
There are those who become coaches because they're afraid to do the work.
Wow. Okay.
And I saw that a lot, especially in what I will call the guru sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody goes into someone's mentorship program, steals their ideas, and says, I'm now a business coach, lies about their success, or has 1 or 2 good months and tells you I have a 6-figure, 7-figure, whatever figure business and blah, blah, blah. And then you go into their program and you realize that they actually can't help me because they didn't really do this thing.
Yeah.
So there are those, I wouldn't have called myself a world-class coach until about the last 2 years of my coaching. And I've been coaching on and off in some capacity for most of my life from the time I was 13. So I have over 30 years from I was coaching elementary and high school basketball while I was a basketball player. I coached when I went to university. I tutored others in math and physics. I've always found myself in some kind of role that involves teaching, mentoring, coaching, instruction.
Gotcha.
And my brain's built for it. I have it. And so, but there are people who just do it to avoid the work.
I see that so much. Yeah.
Yeah. So but the other thing is, sometimes your purpose is not always the thing that you get to make money from. And maybe God makes it this for some people so that you don't become lifted up. Right? This is a hard one to swallow because I think we love the idea that I'm going to find my purpose, and maybe I'm going to find it like a lightning bolt from heaven. I'm like, I found my purpose after being dragged through hell. Okay. That's what took me to get to what I'm doing. I ran away from what I was going to do. I had 11 different professions in my adult life. I ran away from this coaching thing for as long as I could until I had no other choice. Even though I kept falling into doing it anyways. So God dragged me through hell to get me to realize my purpose and then be like, now go and do this. So sometimes finding your purpose is not going to a weekend seminar with Tony Robbins. It's a process of discovery. Yeah. And if you're 22 years old and you wanted to come and try to coach me, respectfully, I'm going to decline because you just don't have the life experience under your belt. I'm sorry.
Nope, you're right.
And that's not a knock on you because I was 22 at one point too and had to figure this business out, But it's like you get this sort of hard-fought experience. So you find your purpose. And here's the other thing. You may think you found it. You're not married to it either because it might evolve over time as you become more able, more gifted, more knowledgeable, more experienced. The other doors of possibility open up. And so maybe also recognize that you might start out with one purpose and then find out that there's another one waiting for you, that you had that for a period of time.
Absolutely.
So, but I know the name of this podcast is Living Boldly with Purpose. And I think ultimately I've finally had the courage to step into this and also to not be afraid to publicly talk about my faith, which was, I had a bit of a tenuous relationship with my faith for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I'm now, and if someone doesn't have a faith, and that's cool, I'll still work with you. That's fine. I don't have to bring it into it. But the reality is, like, the challenges that we as human beings are facing right now are so severe that we almost all need to, in fact, we do all need to call on a higher power to get some help.
Absolutely.
Because we're faced with something that's bigger than ourselves. And so I love coaching, but that's why I say I'm a Daniel.
I love that because Daniel never aspired to be the king.
Yep.
He interpreted, and he made sure that the king was able to do. And then he told him, "You're dumb for doing." After I told you not to do it, he didn't do it. Oh my gosh. He's going to go sick, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in a fire. Like, okay, knock yourself out. It's just, it ain't going to work, but.
How about that, hey? It doesn't matter what you do, whether we live or die, they knew there was a resurrection already.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that the big picture at the end of all of this? Everything we work and we aspire to build up will turn to dust one day, except for the things that we've built up, the treasure we've built up in heaven, the things that we've built up with God.
Yes. And then we get to live in the present. Because right now it's either the past or the future. We can't even perceive this present right now, right?
Yes,
so, as soon as something happens, it's then. So the future is going to happen yet. So, oh my gosh. Well, Coach John, thank you so much for spending your time. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would love for our audience to hear and know? I took a ton of notes, and your story was just amazing, because now I can start thinking through, what do I need to do to really live the way I'm meant to live?
I would just say compassionate awareness is the foundation of transformational change.
Okay.
So the ability to look at your struggles through the lens of compassion versus the lens of judgment. Compassion allows you to see your struggle without judgment, which then allows you to learn and grow from it. Compassion is not get out of jail free. It is not enabling unhelpful behaviors. But we're greeted with compassion because Jesus says to us, I can help you. I know why you're doing what you're doing right now, and I'm not going to condemn you for it right now. Neither do I condemn you. We love that part. The other part's go and sin no more. But there's actually a third part. I will help you to go and sin no more, right? So it starts with bringing our struggles into our conscious awareness through the lens of compassion, so we don't do what Adam and Eve did when they went and hid from God. Yeah. God redeemed them, but when he gave them the skins of animals. So compassionate awareness is the foundation for transformational change.
I love that. And I'm just thinking, the compassionate awareness of ourselves and not judging ourselves.
Yeah.
And you think about just awareness of others around you, but then when you look in the mirror and you're judging yourself for not accomplish what you think you were able to do.
Let God, the righteous judge,
oh my God,
through pass his gracious judgment through advocate Jesus.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you. How can people get a hold of you if they want to?
Oh yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Freedom. My website is freedomnutritioncoach.com. On there, it needs a bit of love because I haven't incorporated all these tools into telling you about it on the website. I started out as like a nutrition and health coach, but you can book a call with me. We'll just have a 30-minute chat, and we'll see if I'm a fit to help you. So freedomnutritioncoach.com.
freedomnutritioncoach.com. And we're with Coach John today, and what an amazing time that we've had together. Go ahead and hit subscribe or, notifications or whatever it is, because I promise you, as we're going through these interviews, you will find somebody who can help you move forward in your journey, whatever that journey is that you're heading in, journey towards your purpose and understanding what that is, and realizing that, just like Coach John said, your purpose may change as a result of you going through what God needs you to go through in order to get there. So I want you to don't forget that you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And I can't wait to see you on the next one. You guys have an amazing day.